And without further ado, we've got Sarah Hanson from Danton HR. Now, it's actually Survive to Thrive was the brainchild of Nicola Roke from Danton HR. And Nicola, as she said, I'm fed up of hogging the limelight. I'm going to let one of my colleagues come in and do the show today. So that's why Sarah's on the show. So welcome, Sarah. It's an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. I know that HR, and I know you do a whole host of HR specific and generalist applications. I know that HR has been used incredibly during the pandemic. Unfortunately, there's been redundancies, there's been restructures, there's been the furlough scheme, there's been managing well-being. You guys, I know for a fact that you guys have had your handful, because I've spoke to Nicola both from my own perspective and to find out how things are faring, and you've done incredibly well, and you've supported a number of organisations. Today's going to be more specific about how HR and how organisations can manage that workforce remotely. We're going to talk a little bit about mental health. We're going to talk a little bit about well-being. We're going to talk a little bit about productivity. But what I'm always really intrigued is a psychological contract, and it can be quite confusing for many. So I want you to dull it down as much as you can and tell us a little bit about the concept of the psychological contract, because there's an element around engagement and managing the workforce and making sure they're engaged to make sure they're still effective remotely, as well as managing their well-being and indeed mental health, which we'll come on to a little bit. So if we set the tone, talk to me about what's the theory behind the psychological contract.
Right, okay, so you set the scene really well, Nick, when you started about traditional contracts and the workforce has changed. And basically, we always think of contracts as something in writing, don't we, that talks about terms and conditions and things that are quite hard in black and white. But actually, the psychological contract is the unwritten contract that employees have with their employers. And it links really nicely to productivity, engagement, and making sure that the employees thrive in the workplace. Now, so for example, I think the best way to describe it is about managing expectations, so that if the employee's expectations match with what the employer wants and vice versa, then you're going to have a really solid and productive psychological contract. Where that contract is broken, so for example, the employees might not feel valued, they're not sure of their worth within the organisation, that's when you start getting issues regarding performance potentially, but also the impact on well-being and mental health as well. So although we talk about the subjects separately, they are all interlinked with one another as well. So that's sort of it in a very minor nutshell, but it's a massive subject that we could talk about for hours.
And you know what, it really interests me. Obviously, I've got another business called Connect Engagement, which revolves around employee engagement, and it's just key to everything. It's just key to comms. It's key to efficiency, productivity, innovation. You know, if you've not got an engaged workforce, you don't have the right culture. You can't deliver your products and services as efficiently. You're not the best version of yourself as a business. But it's really interesting actually, because the psychological contract will be tested during times of duress or stress, and that's exactly what we're in right now in the pandemic.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about how organizations can and it's a subject we can talk about now. One of the great things, and I'm always a half glass full, as Paul and anyone that knows me will tell you. So I think it's good to come out of everything, and I think the one good thing that comes out of the pandemic is two things: the whole be kind mentality, which has transcended beyond social media, just into business. Be human and be kind. We've been through a crazy shared experience, which means that this shared experience, we'll never know the likes of it. I'm hoping we'll never know the likes of it again. And it means we've got some commonality. And as a result of that, we should be more empathetic about each other's requirements, needs, wants, and challenges. And the second thing I think that's good to come out of the pandemic is the fact that mental health, which has been a taboo subject for a very long time, affects 1 in 3 people. This level of stress and pressure and duress has brought this to the fray, and everyone's able to talk about it, which is great, because the more you can talk about it, and from my perspective, mental health in rugby is something no one ever talked about. You know, professional rugby players, which we were, you were big, burly rugby lads, and we never talk about issues. If you've got a problem, you laugh and joke about it. We've got to lift the weight initiative within rugby, which is all around men being able to open up and talk about their feelings, which is great. So moving it back into the context of employees, how we, a lot of people in the first lockdown particularly couldn't see their parents. We lived in, people that would live in central locations in a flat, can't see their friends, can't socialize, can't see anyone, working and living in one space and not a particularly large space. That has exacerbated and brought to the forefront a lot of mental health issues. How prevalent has that been for some of the situations that you've been looking after, and how can organizations manage the mental health of their guys when they're working remotely?
Well, I think the first thing to say is we all have mental health, and sometimes mental health's good, especially in the work. When you're working, you can have really good mental health, so all your energy is very positive and it's contributing to the work that you're doing. We can all relate to this. We have hard days as well, where you can't necessarily think through the wood through the trees, if you like, because you've got so much to do, you're not quite sure what to do first, and you've got those external pressures which you were talking about. And then you've got people that just don't cope at all, and then they can't come into the workplace or work from home. And that is where we've been doing a lot of work actually to prevent that from happening. So regarding looking after people with their mental health, it is about communication, and we've really encouraged workplaces to have a wellbeing plan, and not just have a wellbeing policy that's locked away in a filing cabinet or on a computer system somewhere. It's actually communicating that plan to the whole workforce. And everybody is different and how they want to address any issues that they may have. So equally, it's been as important to be able to signpost people. So there could be a mental health ambassador within the workplace, or they might not want to talk to somebody in the workplace. They want to keep it completely separate. And that's just as important, that we signpost people externally as well. But the key message is to make sure that you communicate that through various means, that there is the support in place for people. But also the way we've been supporting is encouraging informal catch-ups at work. Technology's been brilliant for this, I have to say. So WhatsApp groups, and even old-fashioned picking up the telephone. If you've been on a Teams meeting with someone and you've noticed they've been a bit quiet and not the usual self, I will always pick up the phone afterwards and say, "You okay?" You know, just saying hello to somebody and actually opening a conversation. And as simple as it sounds, it is all about talking. But because you can't see people face to face, there's lots of other things you can do to make people feel they haven't been forgotten, because that is the worry. And we have seen occasions where people don't feel they're part of the team anymore, and they miss the rapport that they have by coming into the office, the informal groups that they have, sharing a coffee in the kitchen or catching up on conversations. So we send out wellbeing packs to people to make sure that they haven't been forgotten. And I've got an example here, actually. I was sent a lovely mug for a coffee and a catch-up session. So we fully recommend just doing really informal things, that so people know that it's okay to talk, and it's okay not to be okay. So and I think as well, I can't reiterate this enough, informal communication, not necessarily formal communication, but informal catch-ups have been the best way forwards.
It's really interesting actually that you say that, because we have like one-to-ones and you have reviews, which you kind of use as the official route to catch anything that could be niggling, or that could potentially fester into something else. But actually, we all know the best way to catch up is either at the coffee machine or in the corridor or outside, you know, going for a walk to get your lunch, and we've missed those touch points. They're not there. So when you talked about the having just picking the phone up and finding out how people are, or indeed an informal catch up, they're the best ways. And you're right, you can spot the cues in terms of, you know, you're on a Zoom meeting, you don't think anyone's all right. Someone told me something which was really interesting. They said, in order to find out if you guys are all right, when you ask them, you know, are you okay? Because we're typically stoic and British, we'll just come back and say, yeah, we're all right. Yeah, we're okay. The person said to me, ask them again, no, how are you really? And by asking
Yes,
someone
yeah,
twice, you're not going to guarantee to unearth anything, but you just give them the opportunity. Because we've all been in that situation. You can say, I'm fine. You can say, I'm great. You can say, oh, not bad. And the not bads and fines, that's probably the bits where you'd be probably worthwhile to question again. I know a lot of people are doing, you talked about the coffee and catch up. It's great. A lot of
yeah.
organizations are doing gifts, gifts to their team. My team weren't too happy about me sending them gifts. My gift was a skipping rope, but I just figured actually everyone moaned about it to start with, but actually it was. Then about half an hour later, everyone was outside the office or in the office making a load of noise, which is just above Paul. So you probably heard it a couple of weeks ago. But little gift packages are great. And you're right. Organizations shouldn't just have something that's it's a tool, in a toolkit, your HR toolkit that's sat in an employee handbook. It's got to be something that we live and breathe. I know a lot of people are doing Zoom catch-ups. They're either doing Zoom meals where they eat together, or Zoom beers, or Zoom glass of wine, or Zoom coffees. Those guys are more Zoom beers, but each to their own, and that's a really nice way of informally, just catching up outside. And I've also seen, I don't know if you've seen it, when you're on a Zoom call and people go, oh, listen, we'll just stay on the call for a little bit longer. So I understand how difficult it is from a remote perspective. I also understand that there are a number of people with those challenges, and I think the more that we can ask the questions, I think it always comes back to engagement, always comes back to comms, doesn't it? It just always comes back to comms. You'll always come around. You don't have a highly engaged workforce with a strong culture if you're not strong communicators. They go hand in hand. In terms of the one thing I wanted to talk about, and I'm glad we spent a long time on the well-being and the mental health, because it's the biggest issue, and I think it's the biggest challenge in terms of managing remote workforce. From a productivity perspective, how involved can HR be in that? Because obviously, you don't want lots of your clients ringing up and saying, listen, we're just not happy about productivity. What do we need to do from a HR perspective? But just around HR and productivity, how are you guys able to influence or assist organizations?
Well, interestingly, many conversations that we've had over the past few months, we've had employers saying, I'm really pleasantly surprised at how productive my team are working from home. I don't think I want them to come back into the office full time again. I want to offer them that flexibility, which gives them a better work-life balance, which allows them to work around their other commitments as well. So I think that trust issue has been amazing, and that is something positive that's come out of COVID, because employers have realised, this can work and this will work. So from an HR perspective, it's just about supporting the employers to make sure that they've got everything set up. So we mustn't forget, actually, that there are people that do still have to go into the workplace for their role. So we're trying to make sure that those that still go into the workplace are treated exactly the same and have the same work-life balance options as those that are working from home, and making sure that everybody is treated equally. On the other end of the scale, we're also looking at making sure that those that work remotely aren't missing out on learning and development opportunities, so they can still develop their skills. So it's a sort of two-way process, really. Making sure contracts are up to date, making sure there's risk assessments in place for people that are working at home. Although it sounds really simple, but if you haven't got the right equipment to work at home, then you're not going to be as productive. And I think, Paul, you alluded to that, didn't you, with connectivity and efficiency with comms as well. So it's a whole host of things, really. So from the softer skills, which you've talked about mental health and engagement, the fact that people realise that you are productive, or perhaps more productive working from home. But those in the workplace that have to work in the office, making sure that there's a fairness there as well as looking at the hard stuff, such as policies and procedures as well.
I love it. And you know what? It's really nice to round off the chat today and we didn't do this on purpose. Actually, it's worked out perfectly from a 360 perspective. I talked around the old narrative, the historic narrative, which is quite archaic, and it's really nice, with people saying, "Oh, you need to earn flexible working and a trust issue." It's really nice, Sarah, for you to say that you're having a resounding level of response from your clients that say we're pleasantly surprised, because it would have been those guys with a mindset of people just don't work as efficiently and effectively and productive working from home. And it's also really nice that they're now saying, what do we need to do to offer this to other people? Because I can tell you from a recruitment perspective, any individual that is looking to embark on a relationship with a business really wants to understand about what makes that business tick. And it's not just financially, it's around what their behaviors, what are the accepted behaviors, what's the culture like. And if there is a culture of trust, and there is a culture of, we trust you to work effectively from home, we don't mind if you do the school run in the morning. We don't mind even actually if you take an hour and a half off in the day, because we know that once the kids to bed or whatever your other commitments are, you'll do that. And actually, people are more willing to do that. And I found that particularly with a number of the guys that work quite far from the office, they don't have a commute anymore. And so some people have got an hour and a half to themselves where they'd normally be in the car or spending petrol. So they don't have that. So they're much more willing in that psychological contract to give something that wasn't expected before. And we all know what happens when people give stuff, people want to reciprocate it. And it's just how relationships are formed and developed. So I'm really pleased that's the new narrative. I'm really pleased that across the UK we've been able to where we've been able to keep that level of productivity, keep businesses propped up, whether they're treading water or they've found an opportunity to thrive and succeed through the pandemic. And that's what the whole of the essence of this program was about surviving to thrive. And on that note, I want to thank Paul Valentine from Spire. I really thank you for your time and for your input. Sarah, I want to thank you too, Sarah Hanson from HR, from Danton HR, for your time today. I'm hoping that the guys that have tuned into the webinar or watched this webinar, once we've put it out into the ether, will enjoy it. We gave the website for Paul Valentine. Sarah, how do people get hold of Danton HR?
Through the website, so dantonhr.com.